Hi, my name is Denise Hurd, president of Hurd Strategies, and welcome to another edition of How They See Us. I absolutely love this programming that we put together as Hurd Strategies, How They See Us, because it gives me an opportunity to talk to my friends out there in the world that are doing amazing things and talk about how their work is perceived or how they do their work and how their work is viewed in the circles in which they have to move. So today I have members of the Hoosier chapter of the Public Relations Society of America with me. And these are members of the DEI community, our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. Hey, y'all. Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
So I'm so glad to see you all. And so I'm going to give you all a chance to introduce yourselves. But I have my friends here because we've been, as a nation, we've been watching a lot of things unfold and we're experiencing, tragedies right in our very own living rooms. And we're watching them and they're alarming and we're wondering, how does this happen? How are we getting this information? Why aren't we getting some information that we're clamoring to get? I mean, we want information because we've been conditioned now to want it and want it right now. And so we were having a meeting, my PR partners in crime, and we were talking about those hidden voices in a crisis, because with every organization in this world, it's not a matter of if you will have a crisis, it's just a matter of when. And so there is always someone in the center of that crisis that's serving as the air traffic controller for communications, and that is the public relations practitioner. It's that communications director, that communications manager, that public information officer. So we thought, hey, there's been a lot of, with mass shootings, DEI issues, just all sorts of things happening. We thought we would come together as communicators and talk about those hidden voices in the midst of a communication crisis. So I want to welcome my friends, and I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with our chair of the community, our committee. I'm going to start with Brittany, and then kick it over to her co-chair, Jen Deswaner. So Brittany, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here this morning with you all. My name is Brittany Jones. I am currently Senior Marketing and Communication Strategist I'm blanking on the name of my company. That's weird. I'm at Indiana State Teachers Association. Got it.
See, that's what happens with PR people. We have so much stuff on our minds with other people's activities, we forget what we're doing for ourselves.
Exactly. So I've been with PRSA for 2 years now as the DEI chair. It's been a wild ride. I always say one of the hardest parts of being in this position and just in PR world in general is it's always something that comes up and you have to figure out if I respond, how do I respond? How are people going to perceive this response once we do? So it's a whirlwind, but I am just glad that I am able to have a voice in the communications world, in the PR world. I am probably one of the youngest. So it's nice to be here and then learn from people such as Denise and Jen. I'm take a lot of what I currently know from you all. So I just love being in you all space.
Thank you. And we love having you here, by the way. So it makes us feel young, but she lightweight called us old too. So, but that's okay.
I did not.
I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you. No, I get it. No, it's fun to watch you and watch Hyacinth and everyone else emerging. It's really, really neat to see. And it lets Jen and I know that we're doing it right, So thank you for that. So Jen, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you. And yes, I was going to say the same. If you didn't say it, Brittany, I was going to mention your youth because it's awesome. And to join something like the State Teachers Association, like you're clearly fearless too. I mean, really, I
Mhm.
hold organizations like that in such high regard. But it's interesting that we're all in sort of different types of places that we work as well. While Denise and I are both with PR agencies, they are different and we love working together on those. Sometimes it takes more than one. But
Mhm.
I am an owner at Borshoff and I've been there 28 years. I've been an owner for 15 years. And yes, crisis is kind of in our DNA at Borshoff. So we've always done it. But to Brittany's point, it's always changing. I mean, the way we do it today is not the way, while there may be some threads of things that are always there and how we work ethically and how we do certain things. As you said, Denise, the world keeps changing, crises
Mhm,
keep getting different, but also how we respond to them keeps changing. And I think that's part of today's conversation.
mhm. And
So thank
thank
you.
you, Jen. Thanks for joining us. And then Hyacinth.
So thank you for having me, Denise. I am
Yeah.
Hyacinth Rucker, and I am currently the Regional Communications Manager at the American Red Cross Indiana region. And I've been there almost a year and a half. I'm approaching a year and a half. Um, and yes, we deal with crisis there a lot, as
Yes,
far as
I can imagine.
disasters happening all the time. So including mass shootings. So it's been a lot considering I came from a museum, which was nothing like where I am now. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. I also wanted to mention that I currently serve as the president-elect for the PRSA Hoosier chapter, and I have been a member for 7 years. So learning from all of you all has been so good and such a blessing.
Thank you, Hyacinth. And we're so glad you made that leap from television over to PR. And we are very happy to
Yes.
have you in our family. So thank you so
And I
much.
haven't looked back. I haven't looked back.
Good, good. So thanks so much for joining us today. So I would be remiss if I didn't recognize another member of our committee who wasn't able to join us for this conversation, and that's Andrea Farmer. Andrea's with the Indiana Donor Network, and she got called away this morning to do some work, and so she wasn't able to be a part of this conversation, but she's a viable and active member of our committee, so we wanted to, give a shout out to her. So let's get to it. I have a question, and it's for all of you all to jump in and respond to. But as PR professionals, we've dealt with a few crises in our careers. We really have, and it's an opportunity for us to really show our muscle. It's where we create message maps. Where we curate those strategic media lists. We write statements. We distribute them. We monitor the media like crazy. I mean, we're pulling those reports like almost like every hour on the hour to see, what's being said out there. And we also move into that counselor side of what it is that we do. And and we spend a lot of time in that area. So let me ask you all, what are some of the other things that you all have employed in your methods in order to deal with crisis? What I've explained are kind of textbook, but are there any other pearls that you utilize when working with clients or with organizations when they find themselves, in the spotlight?
I'll say, yeah, in addition to that list, and I think what's hard about some of these sometimes is the list can look like it's somehow short, but behind each of those things that you just said, there can be like 25 steps sometimes. But
Mhm.
the word that comes to mind is preparation. I think people, a lot of times, we think of crisis as the really acute ones. Something's on fire, something's right now, everybody feels the need to respond immediately. And people don't always take a breath, and you need a breath, and you have to get prepped before you do it. You cannot just throw your statement out too quickly. We've all seen it happen. We can talk about that. We've seen people get in front of a camera too quickly. We've seen and everybody, even internally in organizations, jump to conclusions of how we think we got in this situation. And I think that preparation is just a key part of what we do. We prep spokespersons, we prep messages, we prep statements, and we prepare the organization. I feel like a lot of times the role that I'm in is this is going to be worse before it's better. This is not going to be fixed in 5 minutes. We didn't get into this in 5 minutes. And so it's going to take a bit, and really being that voice of reason. Because on the one hand, of course, you want to be the upbeat and the reassuring, but there's also a part of you that I think has to be the reality check on, here's how people are going to run with this. I know a lot of times what we do, those tough Q&A, as we call them, that we do, which is, not the softball questions, but the really tough ones that are people get very upset when they hear them sometimes because they don't want those questions. But as we always say, we know you may not want them, but this is what media and your own people are going to ask.
Mhm. So preparation, tough Q&A, sessions with our clients, any other pearls, Brittany and Hyacinth, you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would say one of the things we always try to figure out is after the crisis, after we put out the statements, what are we doing or what are we putting into place to make sure that this doesn't happen again,
Mm-hmm.
or to make sure that we're in the best position to know what response we're giving if something does arise or occur. But it's that really the after piece. How are we moving forward? Are we internally doing some type of DEI plan to ensure that we have practices in place for every single member of our organization? So I think it's really important to think about the after piece, to ensure that we're not only in this crisis and managing it, but we're intentionally taking from it, learning from it, and ensuring that we're trying to mitigate it from happening again.
Good point. Mitigation. Hyacinth?
I completely agree with what Brittany just said. It just took me back to working at the Idle Jorg, and um, you know, the George Floyd situation prompted the organization to do exactly what Brittany said,
Mm-hmm.
decide to put together a team to update our DEI statement because it was outdated, to
Mm-hmm.
make it more
Mm-hmm.
current.
Mm-hmm.
And then also that brought about where we needed to do a whole bunch of other stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, I completely agree with the aftermath.
Mm-hmm. Well, Hyacinth, your response actually leads me into the question that I actually had for you. So it's going to
Okay.
give you a chance to expound on that just a little bit, because what I wanted to ask you is, as a Black PR professional, has it ever been hard for you to manage a racially charged crisis? I think that as Black practitioners, um, we felt the George Floyd situation in a whole nother dimension of sight, sound, and
Mhm.
mind, where you actually had to separate you as the PR practitioner from you as the person in order
Right,
to muscle through on behalf of those that you represent. So can
right.
you talk a little bit about that?
I'm sure just like everyone, on here and everyone probably watching, like that scene just was just horrible, right? And it just sparked something in me to reach out to our CEO,
Mm-hmm.
and ask if we could put out a statement. And yes, I had to, I'll say this, I felt like my personal in that moment came with the business. Like I had to speak on behalf of, um, Black people, African American people, and say that I felt like this was something we needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so happy when I had a very, you know, well received response. And that was, you're right, we need to do something. And we immediately, the following day, worked on a statement. Now, the statement was, I think Jen said earlier, like it was, a lot of people involved, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe that was Denise, you saying there was a lot of people involved in, sometimes. But in the end, I felt like another reason, a part, I do social media. And so seeing some of the responses where people were, definitely speaking out and saying, hey, why hasn't this company said anything?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted us to get in front of that as well. It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's do something, let's say something and not be,
Active.
following late,
Mm-hmm.
and no sooner than I said that, that same day we had someone post on our IG
Mm-hmm.
stories, why hasn't the Idol George said something yet?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so I was able to respond that we are working on something and we will have a statement here soon.
Mm-hmm.
So I in that moment, it was also kind of foreseeing what could come
Mm-hmm.
in the future if we didn't do anything. Um, but yeah, I think my personal feeling, like I needed to speak up and I
Mm-hmm.
needed to say something.
That makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you
Mhm.
so, so very much. Jen, I'm going to come over to you because, we've, total transparency, Jen and I have had the opportunity to work together on several crises together, which is interesting because we've had to have some really intimate conversations about race, microaggressions, all sorts of things that, we as Black and white people don't talk to each other about. We just, we coexist when we are need to. Then on Sundays, we go to our respective corners because, that's the most segregated day of the week when we go to church, and then we come back together during the week and go to work. So we had a chance to work together on several things and just have those conversations. And so I want to ask you, Jen, that since George Floyd, how we communicate has changed drastically in our discipline. And even our journalists are writing very differently when it comes to DEI issues. And so, in what way, how do you think DEI has shaped how we communicate during a crisis?
In so many ways that I hope we're kind of documenting it, because when you're living it, I think you're not always that good at, at putting it down. But I know that Denise, you and I have talked about, and potentially Brittany and Hyacinth as part of our, committee that we've talked about. One big learning is the things that people used to get away with, they kind of don't get away with anymore. And that's such a general statement, but I think the bar just keeps moving. I want to believe it's all in such a better direction, but we're seeing where things that organizations could say, they need to adapt now and not say it in quite the same way. Where some boards tolerated some things from some administrators and vice versa. Some administrations tolerated some things from boards.
Mhm.
And I think all of the changing foundation of the world, and I know I'm trying to be super realistic that the whole world has not changed like we want it to change, and there's a potential for change, but I'm very, very aware of how it hasn't changed. But I feel like that shifting foundation made everybody wake up and either decide we could do better, or it completely freaked them out. And so you've got some people who just are less comfortable than other. I'll just give a quick example. We work with a lot of higher ed. We have boards of trustees who are almost all white, male, wealthy, and older. They have given blood, sweat, and tears to this organization, and they're saying, why do our students hate us? And that's just an interesting phrase, because we're trying to say, well, they don't hate you. But at the
Mhm.
same time, they've been given this opportunity to say things they couldn't say and to see things they
Mhm.
couldn't see before. And so
Mhm.
to move that whole organization along, so challenging. I'm such an optimist, and I just want to believe we're living in a really important time where now, where the crisis may have had nothing to do with DEI has to be part of the conversation just
Mhm.
about every time now. And we're either bringing that or somebody brings it up when they hire us.
I agree. I think you said that, like, we are living in such an important time where we have been given the baton to, to make the changes, to, and pass that baton to those coming behind us. That, just because that's how it was doesn't mean that's how it will be. And so I just think that all of us have just been given an awesome opportunity to shift the narrative of our nation. And, what an awesome, what a great honor to be a part of this conversation, where for so long our, generations before us, Black, white, whomever, never got that opportunity. And now we do. Just like the same for us as women, we're having the opportunity to have conversations that we just had never been able to have. And just like our LGBTQIA people, our community, they're able to have conversations. We're all able to have conversations. When everybody's talking, we can move things forward, talking and listening and making change. So, Brittany, I'm coming to you. So, so the question I have for you is, crisis, it's kind of like mayhem, those mayhem commercials, it just kind of
Mhm.
appears when it wants to. And so we can't choose the crisis. And oftentimes we get pulled into very messy and disheartening situations. And so when this happens, how do you as an individual stay grounded and stay focused while ushering an organization or a client through a crisis?
That's a loaded question. I think it's tough, right? When we talked about George Floyd, I think we've kind of mentioned this, but me as a Black woman, I felt all of that, right? I felt all of that pain, that hurt, that anger.
Mhm,
But I think one of the things that I had to do for myself, but also for the work, to
mhm,
separate myself from it. Right now,
mhm,
I'm doing the work um, so that other people can know, you know, that it's okay. We're going to get through it.
mhm,
Um, this is something that's happening all over the world. It's not okay. It's not
mhm,
something that should be categorized as normal. But we have to continue on the backside to make sure that we're in organizations kind of shifting this past history and making active changes to make a new beginning or a new story.
mhm,
But I had to separate myself from that work in that moment.
mhm,
Later on, once I packed up and went home, then I could have all the feelings I wanted to feel. But I
mhm,
think it's important to ensure that take a breath,
mhm,
pause, kind of try to
mhm,
separate yourself from
mhm,
your intimate feelings and remind yourself that you're doing the work for a bigger purpose. You're serving for a bigger purpose, and that it's going to get better
yeah.
eventually. The work that you're doing is going to ensure that it gets better, and so it can be hard, it can be daunting, it can be frustrating, but I think that you have to feel those emotions after the
Mhm,
fact.
mhm. So I'm going to ask all three of you all a question. This is a question for anyone that wants to address it. I remember during the Michael Brown shooting, which happened, in Missouri, outside of St.
Mhm.
Louis. And, that was, we all saw that play out on CNN in front of our very eyes. And I remember the community and even on social media, people demanding that the police department say something, that the police department come out with something. And people felt as though they were moving too slowly and we weren't getting responses and what have you. And so I remember talking to a reporter from the area about timing and why during a crisis sometimes we're not able to give information or divulge information when the people want us to. And that's a tough call as a PR person who's responsible for all of that message management. So can you all talk a little bit about timing and information sharing and the strategy that goes behind that? Because that can get very intense and also take your crisis to a whole nother level, both for your client who wants to say something, and you who's trying to make sure you're being strategic about when and what and how.
When we do a lot of crisis training these days and everything, a lot of what we talk about is timing, because there is such a window between you have to know enough to be intelligent and to put something out that's going to have some meaning and not wait so long that people are infuriated. What a window that is. And it totally
Mhm,
depends on the type of crisis. There isn't one answer to that window.
mhm,
Your example of a police involvement is like a whole nother level too of bureaucracy and challenges and different communicators. And then you've got like data breaches, and then you've got sexual harassment things, then you've got different lawsuits. Like there's so many different things in there. But one, more brief answer to what you're saying is I don't think that statements always do a good job enough of telling people what a timeline looks like. Like,
yeah,
let's tell people,
yeah,
look, here's what we have the information now. We will be back with you with more. We
mhm,
will not have that yet, though, because this has to go through a procedure. This has a process to it. You should never say no comment. You should never have absolutely nothing to say, but come out with some compassion and the
mhm,
facts that you do have, and that we are going to be looking into this more, but that we absolutely cannot speak. And I think we're seeing a way better job from some of these. That people are just, for some organizations for the first time, are hiring a communications person in some police and other organizations like that. Two, they're hiring DEI officers for the first time. We
mhm,
know what a clamoring there it is for that now. So I think we're seeing a little bit more credence given to those things, but coming out with something and then continuing, I guess, to update the statement, to update with
mhm,
what you have. Your initial statement might last for a while, but um, I think we've joked about the second statement is always better than the first one. Like the
Yeah.
first one is always kind of a hot mess. You know, somebody's either blaming too much or they're freaking out too much or they're way too defensive or it's
Mhm,
practically a no comment. And the second one is far better. Well, there's a
mhm,
lesson in that.
mhm,
I like to say that I think it's so important to make sure that you're not trying to be first. You know what I'm saying? Like in these moments, it's no reason to just rush it, and to make sure that when you come out, like you've really been able to talk to a number of people, and make sure you have all the information as much as you can, as you said. So I think that's what I would want to add to the table is
mhm.
in the first realm, like this is it. You're not trying to be first, and I come from a news background, so I get that, but um, you want to be given a statement that's telling people what they want to know.
Mhm, mhm,
No, I agree with both of you ladies. The only thing I want to add is I think it's important to kind of, take your time, assess the situation,
mhm,
because then you always have those people that may look at your statement, the outsiders, the
mhm,
viewers, and they may say, "Oh, this looks rushed," or they may have a comment based on the statement that may be negative. So I think it's important to take your time. Jen, I think what you propose is a fabulous idea. Say in that statement, "Hey, this is what we know. We'll come back and with this
mhm,
information once we have it." I
mhm,
think that's a great strategy.
mhm. Thank
If
you
I
all for that. Oh,
if
go
I
ahead,
can
Jen.
add real quick, I'm sorry, I was just going to say social media, that's like a whole animal and challenge unto itself. But,
Mhm,
when you're just a troll or a hater or an anonymous person of the public, you can start demanding a lot of things on social media, and organizations think they have to respond to that. And a
mhm,
lot of
mhm,
times, it's such a fine line again between we do want to be monitoring and seeing what those conversations are out there so we know what we're
mhm,
kind of up against, but not
mhm.
giving them so much credit that we
Yeah,
start jumping to
yeah,
respond to somebody online. It's
yeah.
nuts.
That is a really, really good point, and actually led into my next question about social listening and how that influences how you manage messaging during a crisis. Because, there are reports that we can pull as PR people that we have access for that can give us an analysis of the confidence and of the commentary that's out there in social media. And what we find when we pull those reports is that it's more neutral than anything, but it's the negative that stands out. So yeah, you want to talk a little bit about that, how social media has really thrown a curveball in how we manage crisis?
What I will say is, I mean, it's important to know what's being said, right? To
Mhm,
have to be aware of the social listening and, different hashtags and things like that. But just like you said, it's not something that you say, let me hurry up and respond. Again, it's still one of those things that, okay, when I get a comment, or a tweet that has tagged us in, something,
mhm,
let's bring this to the people that need to hear about it. Let's craft a statement, you
mhm,
know, that because once it's out there, it's out there. The way I look at it when it comes to digital, you put it out there, somebody can screenshot it no sooner than you put it out there before you can delete
mhm,
it.
mhm,
So always keep that mindset that whatever you're putting out in a digital realm is out there forever.
mhm,
And so it's really important that you do take your time and you don't rush in anything that you do,
mhm,
but that you are aware of what's being said. I think that's the biggest thing is
mhm,
that, I try and make sure as a social media manager that I'm really working 24 hours a day, in many ways. I mean, most of the time people aren't going to do this in the middle of the night, because they want a lot of people to see whatever they're doing, right? But um, it's just one of those things you do need to be aware, and you still need to take your time when you respond.
mhm,
Yeah, I think with anything, you have to assess the magnitude of the comment. So if
mhm,
it's something that, I mean, on social media, the hairy part is, and Jen, you said this, there's just trolls. They're going to be negative. They're going to make comments. And so those comments that oh, they're just talking because this is what they do.
mhm,
we ignore those. It's
Mhm.
okay. But when it's something, a comment being made against your organization, then I think that's when we need to sit and talk about it, figure out how we're going to address it. If we need to address it, if we're going to respond back in comment or make a statement from it. But I think with anything, you just have to assess the magnitude of the comment and how it's going to affect the organization.
Mhm. Thank you all so very much. We just have a couple of minutes left, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into crisis, and because we mentioned crisis mitigation, but we've not talked about crisis planning. And a lot of organizations are left vulnerable when a crisis occurs because they have not created a plan. And so I want to talk to the three of you all, and I'd love to get your perspective about the importance of organizations taking time out now when things are calm to create a crisis plan so that when something occurs, we know who you're going to call, kind of like Ghostbusters, who you're going to call, who's in that inner circle, where is our war room, who does the talking. So can you all talk a little bit about that and sketch that out for us?
We do a lot of that these days, and I have to say it's probably one of the biggest changes in my career, is that people get it now a lot more organizations get it. I mean, we used to go into almost every situation with it being this, no one has a plan, we're all making it up as we go. And now, and then we went through the phase of like gigantic binders where, you know, maybe had a plan, so you talked about it, but no one wanted to pull that thing off the shelf because it was just too daunting. And now we're trying to get it down to something way more usable. And we always recommend to organizations, once a year, have a crisis plan and walk through it. Just walk through it with your top people. Things change, technology changes, people change, roles change, departments change. You really need to once a year, revisit it. And that the crisis that occurs will not be exactly what's in your plan. It will always be a
Never
little
is.
different. You won't have the exact scenario in there,
Mhm.
but at least you will have all talked about it. And everybody just does such a better job when they know somebody is in charge of this. They know that there is a process for handling this. Really, I think it's as much for your employees as it is for anybody else, too. It's for your employees to know that somebody has sat at a table and had a conversation about how we're going to handle this. And we have seen it time and again what a difference it makes with avoiding. I would say what it really does is it just helps you avoid the biggest landmines, which can be somebody running out there and saying no comment, which can be people. The best thing to do is to get a multifunctional, a cross-functional group at the table and having a good conversation. And that's what crisis planning helps you do. That did not always used to happen. Um, Things were thought of as crisis because no one had thought of it before. Like, it does not have to be. You can think about this in advance, have some good planning, and it does help you weather things better.
Yeah, I just completely agree with what Jen just said, is that it's so important to have a plan, ahead of time, and to have, I think the biggest part for me is make sure that employees know who's the person that they should reach to if they're reached out to, right? So if they get an email or a call or something, that they know who they need to be reaching out to, and that they are not to respond. I think that's the biggest thing, is that you want them to know you aren't the one to respond, because
Mhm.
there needs to be strategy behind it, right? So I agree. I mean, Jen said pretty much everything that I could think of
Mhm.
saying, but for me, the part that comes to me that really is highlighted is making sure all the employees know what to do.
Mhm.
I'll add one more quick thing. What we've really learned, some really large organizations, everybody's answer was to go back to one person. And if that one person is on a cruise or something when that happens, you're like,
Right,
this is not a plan, people.
right.
It's like they thought it was a plan because everybody goes to her. And you're like, no, like there has to be, we need backup plans. We need more
Right.
people, and we need more people trained in that, because I think even in really big organizations, it sits on the shoulders of one or two people. They think those people are great, they'll handle it. And I'm sure in the places where you all are, it's you. In other words, everybody's counting on Hyacinth, Brittany, Denise, they're just going to take care of it. I have actually met people out in public whom I do not know, and they will say, "Oh, I know you. You're on our crisis plan. You're who we call if we have a problem." I'm like, "Oh, that's
How
great.
sweet.
Who
It's
are you? Like, what is going on here?" But I really think it sits on a few people think that those couple of people will be the fixers, and it has to be a little bit broader than that, at least in some
Yeah.
basic education, because if that person's not available,
Mhm.
needs more in the plan.
Absolutely. So we just have a few minutes left. And so I'd like to give you all at least a minute to kind of any final comments that you'd like to make about, that hidden figure in the midst of the crisis, that communications person. Any other final comments you'd like to add today?
I think what I'd like to share is just that there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes, right? It may not look like there is a lot going on, but there's strategy, behind it, and there's tactics behind it. And we really don't just want to go out there willy-nilly, right? Like we want what we do to have an impact. And so whenever we're watching other stories unfold, I think I immediately go to, ooh, what is going on behind the scenes? Because a lot is going on, and just to understand that it's a process, and we're growing, and it's an exciting time to be a part of PR.
It is. It is. Brittany, Jen?
Yeah, one thing I would say, and I can't stress this enough, I don't like when people just put out statements and say that they're doing something to mitigate it from happening again, just to check a box. Make sure that if we're putting out this statement, if we're saying this, then we're actively doing the work internally, and we're not just saying it because we think that's what people want to hear. I think we have to ensure that our outside message matches our internal feelings and process. And so PR is not something that you just do. It's not when a crisis
Not a
occurs.
verb.
You have to live by what you say in these messages. So that's extremely important.
Thank you for sharing that.
And I'll add to that, Brittany, real quick. People know when you're not living what you're doing, what you're saying. Like now, these days, people are paying attention and going and looking and seeing if you're doing exactly what you're saying. So you can't hide behind a statement anymore.
Jen.
Just one thought I have is how hard it is, but how important it is that we stay objective a little bit and stay outside. It is very easy to get caught up in, the vortex of a crisis. And I think it's a really important role that PR people play, to be the eyes and ears of the outside, to be seeing what is the public seeing, to be trying to stay connected with that, even when you're sitting at the table and you're very caught up in the emotion and the importance of this situation. I feel like that's a really important role we play. And it's why hiring outside to work with inside works so well. It's almost like, I think some organizations think, oh, it's a sign of weakness if we hire outside, if we don't have this figured out. No, you want somebody on the outside because they're on the outside. You want to work with an inside person, but you actually want somebody on the outside as well, so that they stay outside of it and can be those eyes and ears. And I think that's just a really critical role that PR people play, whether on the inside or the outside, is be that voice of truth when it's hard to tell sometimes.
I agree. So I just want to thank the three of you all for joining me for this important conversation about that hidden figure inside of a PR crisis, the communications person, because as we all know, from coronavirus to police action shootings to the economic crisis that we're experiencing involving gas, food shortages, supply chain issues, crisis is it's our middle name. Crisis is in our DNA, and we are witnessing crisis unfold in front of us, right in our living rooms, right in our homes. And it's good to know and always remind people that there is someone in the center that's helping manage those messages. While it may not be on our timeline, it may not be what we want to hear, the importance of having that person in the mix is it's just unprecedented in these days. And I commend the work that the three of you all are doing, and all of the communicators out there in the world that have their fingers on the pulse of a crisis and crisis mitigation and planning and all the things that go into ensuring that an organization can return to normal operations once they get through this difficult time. So thank you all for joining me again and having this conversation. And I want to thank the Herd Strategies team for helping us put together this episode of How They See Us. And I encourage you to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Our handle is @Herd Strategies to learn more about us. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye.